but its mouth is not a snout. Its mouth looks like a human's mouth that could dislocate its jaw and come down about another 5 inches, 4 to 5 inches. Like, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Cursed Urban. My name's Dan, and tonight we're doing something a little bit different. Something that has been highly requested by, well, over a few dozen viewers, I would say, and that is telling scary stories. A lot of people have asked or recommended when I've asked, hey, what new videos do you guys want to see? What new style of content would you like me to do? The response has always been an overwhelming, do scary stories while camping, out by the campfire, it doesn't matter, just do scary stories, tell us scary stories. Your wish is my command. So tonight is the first Cursed Urban scary storytelling video, and we'll see how it goes from here. But right now we're out in the tents, no campfire tonight, but we're keeping warm in here, and yeah, we won't delay. Let's get right into it. I do have a story for you guys, and this was actually sent to me from a viewer of the channel who wishes to remain anonymous, but you know who you are. Big shout out and thank you for sending me your story, a couple months ago. I think it was back in the summer, I believe. And I reached out to them and made sure that they didn't mind if I shared it with you guys for when I said I was going to do a video like this. So yeah, let's get right into it. They were so gracious enough to fill me in with a little bit more information as well. So this happened, I believe, they said about 3 winters ago now. 3 winters ago, at the very beginning of winter. They lived out in Colorado, and the person who sent it to me, their name is Jason, and they have a brother who is a year younger than them named Christian. Jason and Christian grew up in Colorado. They grew up always camping, hiking, and exploring the Rocky Mountains, because they were in a smaller town right near its base, and that was their hobby. And ever since they were young, they went out on their own. Their parents, were a bit of survivalists, so they were taught at a young age how to go out and take care of themselves, like what to do in emergency situations and so on and so forth. So they were very, very seasoned campers. They weren't new to camping at all. Now, when this whole thing unfolded, I believe Jason said they were about 21 and 22, I believe, yes. And they were, at college, they grew up, they're very close brothers. That was cool. They stayed close, and they were very close brothers. It was always them hanging out and their friend Brett, who was Jason's age. So those three were kind of the clique. Of course, they had other friends, but they mainly did everything together. Brett wasn't as much of a camper, though. He wasn't as much of an outdoorsman as Jason and Christian were. He was more homebody. Let's play some, Nintendo. Let's, do something inside. But they still hung out whenever they could, all the same. And occasionally, Brett would go with them to go camping or to go hiking. It's not like he was completely against it, but, it just wasn't one of the things he favored. Well, around this time, all three of them had separated to go to different universities. One Colorado, one Arizona, and one in Utah. So it was harder for them to hang out. Of course, they saw each other on breaks when they all came back home, and, some get-togethers throughout the year, and spent, a good majority of the summer together when they, weren't working their summer jobs. But this year, Jason and Christian, this was right around the winter break for school, they decided, hey, it's still looking pretty good out. Like, it's still pretty warm, pretty favorable weather. What if we do a camping trip, up in the Rockies, that spot we like. They had a few spots, off the beaten trail type stuff that they loved to go to, one of those, so nobody knows about it but us. And they said, yeah, that sounds great. And they discussed in their group chat, which Brett was a part of the group chat. Brett was surprisingly down for it as well. He said, yeah, count me in. Let's go do a little weekend camping while we're all home. So that was kind of the rough plan, is we were all going to meet on Friday and then spend 2 full days hiking and camping in the Rockies, and then return home Monday. Now, the trail that they chose to do was not necessarily long, but it was very grueling. It was a very, very advanced trail. Even Brett was apprehensive about doing this, but he knew if he was going with them, they weren't going to throw him into something he couldn't handle. So he put his apprehension aside and just decided to go with it. So the weekend came. They were at home. They got together, I believe, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and finalized all their plans. The weather was looking good. Didn't look like there's going to be any snow, any rain. Looks like it was going to be nice and overcast. A little bit crisp on the temperature, but it made good if you're always moving. So they confirm everything. They say, all right, you know what, this is good. We're good to go with this, and we'll meet on Friday. We'll pick you up, pick Brett up, head out to the trailhead. We'll get started. So they Friday comes along, and the plan goes exactly like that. Jason and Christian pack up. They pack fairly light. They got all high dollar stuff. High dollar stuff. Like I said, this is one of their passions. So it's one of those things that's spare no expense. Lighter the better. Just get the best of the best. They're going to use it. They're going to push the equipment to the max and everything like that. So they pack up, and they have, they got their bags on. They have their tents. They have their sleeping bags. They have their sleeping mats, fire starters, MREs, which are meals ready to eat, water purifiers, everything like that. All the essentials. They got their GPS, everything like that. So they're good to go. They're ready to go. They bring extra stuff because they know Brett is going to pack as best as he can. But, he's not on their level, nor does he care to be. So, of course, they have more than enough equipment to go around. So they bring some extra for him in case he needs it. So they go, get all their stuff, they put it in the car. They go, pick up Brett. Brett gets in. And they head out to the trailhead. It's about an hour and a half drive, I think they said, from their house. And they get there. They park. Nobody else is there, which is not unusual, especially for that time of the year. It's not a lot of people know about this spot. It's very isolated. They didn't even see another car for the last 20 minutes of driving to the trailhead. So they're a very isolated spot. So they park, get out, get all their stuff ready, get their windbreakers and everything on, zipped up, triple check their equipment, and they have the snowshoes in the car. And they look at these snowshoes. They have 2 sets of them, so not enough for all 3 of them, but they have 2 sets of them. They look at them and they briefly discuss, like, hey, should we bring the snowshoes just in case? And they double check, actually I should say quadruple check the weather there, and it looks fine, it looks clear. Obviously, as you can tell from me mentioning that, it's probably going to play a pivotal role here in a little bit. So they leave the snowshoes in the car, they pack up, lock the car up, leave a note on the window, which they always left a note on the window saying, we will be back at this vehicle at this time. If it is past this time, please send rescue. Our coordinates are, and they write it on the paper and they stick it inside the car, between the window and the little seal. So great idea. I didn't even think about that until I read it when they were telling me about it. It was a great idea. So they leave their note, in case of emergency, so if anybody comes by and anything has happened, they can send rescue their way. So they're all set. Car's locked. They're packed up, and they head up the trail. Absolutely beautiful day. Absolutely gorgeous day. Gorgeous day. Couldn't ask for any better weather. And they set out at a really good pace. They're starting to make good time. They time it, and they think they have to do about 5 miles to get to their first camping spot, because their intent is to go from the car to the first camping spot, which is, even though it's only 5 miles, it's going to take them about 3.5 hours to make those 5 miles at a good pace. So that's kind of giving you an example of how treacherous these trails are. So they decide to do that, and then the next day they will go 2 miles further, and that will be the camping spot for the next night. And then they can make it back that 7 miles easily in one day with a couple shortcuts, and because it's all mostly back downhill, so a lot easier. So yeah, they go. As I said, they could not have asked for better weather. They're keeping a fantastic pace, looking like that it might even be ahead of schedule for them to get to their campsite. Don't mind me, just got a little bit of hot chocolate there, keeping warm. Well, the heater's doing a good job as well. But so they go. Everything is dead at this point. It is winter. It's just not as cold as it usually is. And they're hiking, and they make it to the first campsite with no issues. They arrive there a few minutes ahead of schedule, not too much. They don't break any records, nor were they weren't trying to, but they make it there ahead of schedule. They get camp set up. They get tent set up. There's a nice little stream, very small, but a nice stream that goes right by the campsite for fresh water and everything like that. So it's perfect spot. And they get everything set up, get their tent set up. Help Brett get all of his stuff set up, which he's doing great. They were blown away. They were really surprised that Brett was keeping up with them. And they make some dinner. They grab some water from the stream, boil it over the campfire, and prepare their freeze-dried dinners. And sit down, eat a little bit. Jason brought a little tiny flask-size bottle of moonshine, apple pie moonshine. And they sat around the campfire, sipped on that a little bit. Got a little buzz, ate enough food, made some fruit cobbler they had, and it was good. It was a good night, a cold night. They could tell that it was getting very cold, but a good night. And after that, they packed up their stuff and went to bed. Zipped up the tents, got in the sleeping bags, lights out. Knocked out. They were exhausted from that first day. Absolutely zapped. Well, the night goes on. This was about 10:30 at night. The night goes on, rolls around to about quarter to 2, around then. Christian wakes up. Nature calls. He was the one who had a little bit more than the other two out of the bottle, so he had to go take care of business. Zips the tent, walks out, and how the tents are set up is they brought 2. So Jason and Christian are staying in the bigger one, and Brett's in a smaller single-man tent. So Christian gets out of the tent. He walks out of the tent, and he's going to take care of business. He doesn't want to pee by his tent, so he walks a little ways away from it. Does the deed. And as he's sitting there, the air's getting to him. It's getting cold, and he shudders a little bit. And that's when he hears something. He hears a very, very faint, like scratching noise. The way he can describe it is almost like this. Like somebody is scratching nylon or vinyl with their nails. And he looks around, he looks at the tents, he thinks, okay, it's probably, a branch, swiping against the tents. But the thing is much like tonight, it was an extraordinarily still night. No wind, even being up in the mountains. Just a nice, very calm night. And they were camped out in the middle of a field, or a little of a pasture type area. There wasn't anything that would be rubbing on the tents. Well, the noise stops as quickly as it began. And, he's finishing up using the bathroom. And that's when he hears it again. Just that noise. And he's like, what is that? And he looks, and it's cloudy, and it's a full moon. So the whole landscape is a little bit illuminated by the moonlight. And he looks out past the tents, past the stream, probably about 100 yards, 75 to 100 yards. And he sees a silhouette. He said it was this silhouette, and it looked almost like a very, very shaggy dog. But being that far away in the moonlight, it was almost impossible to tell. The thing that he remembered the most, though, was he said he knew when it looked at him. He could see, even that far away, its eyes. Its eyes were so reflective that it looked like they were glowing when it looked back at him. And he thought, okay, it's a wolf. It's a very big wolf, because they have those there. It definitely wasn't a bear. It was more, you could tell it was more sleek than a bear. And he's like, all right, it's a wolf. And it just looked at him, and he looked back at it, just for a few seconds. Now, it might sound scary, but they, as I said, they are very seasoned. They know how to deal with any type of wildlife, and they're just, it's not something they really worry about. So he wasn't really scared by this yet. But as he kept looking at this wolf, what happened is the wolf stood up. It stood up onto its back legs, and he could just make it out. He said its back legs did not look like a canine's back legs. They looked more like human. It stood up, still not breaking the stare with him, and walked away. Which it didn't take far for it to walk out of sight. It just disappeared behind some bushes again. It was quite a distance away from him. So he's still half asleep, freezing, And what was that? That was, okay, maybe it was a bear. Maybe my eyes deceived me. Maybe it was a very skinny bear that got up and walked away. It's not impossible. So puts this out of his mind, goes back to bed, puts his can of bear spray by him just in case. And yeah, the rest of the night, no problems. Completely peaceful. So they wake up in the morning, they make breakfast, make some coffee, make some hot chocolate, and they are packing up when Christian brings up this encounter to Jason and Brett. And he explains exactly what happened. Hey, I was up at night, during the bathroom, and I saw this weird animal. It looked like a wolf, all black wolf, but it stood up and it walked away like a bear would have. And, they're sitting there, the three of them brainstorming, like, oh, what could this be? What could this be? And they all, arrive at the same conclusion, just as Christian did. Oh, it's probably, just a skinnier bear. Nothing crazy, just a skinnier bear. And that was it. That was it for the subject. That's all the stock they put into it. Anyways, they finished up, getting packed up, hit the trails. Now today was a little bit more harsh conditions. It was a little bit windier. It's a little bit colder. The skies were a little bit grayer. But nonetheless, they managed to march on towards their destination, which was, wasn't going to be too big of a hike today. It's 2 miles, but it was 2 very difficult miles. 2 miles of unforgiving terrain to make it up. So they had to put almost as much energy into these 2 miles as they did the first 5. That's how bad it was. But they made it, they made it, and they still had sunlight, and they made it to a similar spot as they found last night. Nice pasture type area, not too far from a stream. And they decided they'd set up there. And that, it'd be a good spot for the evening. So they take their backpacks off, they're stretching out, they're getting comfortable again, trying to shake off some of the tightness they had from the hike up. All 3 of them were secretly happy that they were going to be hiking back down tomorrow and not up still. So they shake it off, and that's when Brett notices something. And he doesn't want to be the one to say it. But what he notices is what feels like a pinprick right on his cheek. A very cold pinprick. And he knows exactly what it is. But he doesn't want to say anything because he feels if he does, he will speak it into existence. And he doesn't want to be the one to do that. He doesn't want to be the one that speaks what he knows is about to happen into existence. But it's not too long until Jason says, "You gotta be kidding me." They all look up into the sky in unison as another snowflake comes. Lands right on Jason's cheek. Another one comes. Lands right on Christian's forehead. It's snowing. The weather did not hold up, and it was snowing. It was just a little bit at first, but they looked into the distance and they could see it was going to be bad. It was not going to be a fun night, probably. So Jason and Christian immediately go into, battle plan mode. Like, okay, here's our options. 1, we stay here. We wait it out. and see what happens. We stick to the plan. We head back tomorrow. Option 2, we leave right now. We haul ass. We get back to the cars. We call it a night. But, you know, it's still light out. But, you know, it's still going to be easily a 4 or 5 hour hike down. And so none of these options are looking good, and they come with option 3. Option 3 is we head back the way we came, see how far we can make it. If the snow gets too bad, we'll stop. You know, we'll stop. We'll set up camp wherever we are at, and we'll make it back the rest of the way the following day. And that's when they kick themselves for not bringing these snowshoes with. So they sit there and they weigh their options, like which one sounds the best. They ask Brett to weigh in, and what they all kind of decide is, it sounds like option 3 is kind of going to be the best. They're going to try and get back down as much as they can, and then set up camp wherever they need to, and then head back, you know, and then hike the rest of the way back on Monday. Or if they absolutely need to, they can wait another day. They have plenty of supplies. They packed enough food for almost a week. So they don't really have anything to worry about. They brought tools. They brought fishing poles. Like, they're fine on supplies. So living off supplies, you know, or having enough supplies is fine. It's just more of an inconvenience to them. That's how they look at it. But they all unanimously agree option 3 is the best. We haven't unpacked any of our stuff. It's still in our bags. We just got to put it back on and head back down. Okay, let's do it. So that's what they do. Begrudgingly pick up their bags, and snap them in, and start heading back down the mountain. Now, thankfully, the snow is still only a couple little flurries here and there. It hasn't increased in intensity yet. And as they're hiking, they kind of decide they're making really good time, you know, and that's, you know, on purpose, because they got a storm to outrun. They're making really good time, and they think they can make it back to the original campsite that they were at last night. So they say, all right, let's aim for that. You know, we're almost halfway there by now. The snow's still a flurry. You know, it's barely covering like anything on the ground. I think we'll be good. I think we can make it. So they say, okay, let's do it. So they continue just to haul, just as fast as they safely can, keep going down the trail. So they are about to the original campsite, the first night campsite, about 1/8 of a mile out. And it's like a switch is flipped right then. From flurries to near blizzard. Just within the matter of a few minutes. It just starts snowing. It starts snowing and snowing and snowing. And they know they can make it to that campsite, but they don't think they can make it much further. So they lock in and they hike. They hike like their lives depended on it. Which to Jason and Christian, you know, they don't care about this stuff. It's a challenge. You know, they've done this stuff their whole lives. They've camped in the winter before. They don't care. You know, it's a challenge to them. It's fun. But Brett is getting a little bit worried now. But he's trying to keep it together. You know, he doesn't want to be the one that's out there and be like, oh, woe is me. You know, I'm terrified that we're going to die in the snow. So he's keeping it together as best as he can. And they make it. They make it not a minute too soon. They get into the campsite. They immediately go around and gather as much wood as they can find before it's completely buried by snow to make a fire. They get the wood, they put in a pile. They get their tent set up, and yeah, it's looking good. It's looking like, they're at a safe spot. They'll survive this. And it's really coming down now, hard. Probably about an inch an hour, which that adds up really quick. So they get the fire started, melt some snow, scrape the snow into the tin, melt the snow to make a little bit of dinner. And yeah, they're going to make the best of it. They're not going to let the snow ruin the time they have out there. They're just going to hope it's not going to be too much. They got their fingers crossed because they don't have any cell service. They can't check. There's no way they can figure out how much snow they're going to get. They do still have their GPS though. That's fully charged. So worst case scenario, they can hit SOS on GPS, and they know people will be there within 6 hours to get them. So that gives them a little bit of solace. So yeah, it's another night. It's another night. They're sitting back around the campfire. They built a big bonfire. They're making their next freeze-dried meal. They're getting out some sweets they had packed, some nice processed apple pies and ho-hos and snowballs, of course, Hostess snowballs. They got to chuckle that Brett brought those out of everything, given the circumstances for the night. And, they're sitting around the fire. They're having a good time. And, they're laughing. They're enjoying it. It's a good vibe. It's a really good vibe. Just being with good friends, family, sitting around the fire in an absolutely isolated place while the snow comes around. Nice, peaceful, quiet night. You can't hear anything. It's until they hear something in the distance yet again. They hear a branch break and a twig snap. And they all turn and they look. Jason and Brett are sitting with their back towards the trail, and Christian's sitting on the other side, and the sound comes from the other side of the trail. So they turn back, and Christian looks straight ahead. And that's when they see something. That's when they see something they can't explain. That's when they see the same exact thing that had visited their campsite the previous evening. And that is this giant black bipedal wolf-looking creature. But this time all they can see is its outline. It's standing just out of the light's reach. And they can see it just through the snow. It's standing on its 2 feet. And it's standing about 10 feet tall to the top of its head. It has long arms with fingers that look like they have very, very nasty claws on them. But its arms were one of the things that freaked the guys out the most. Because its arms, as it was standing straight up, its fingers ended between its ankle and its knee. That's how long its arm span was. It's down at its sides. Its fingers were between its ankle and its knee while standing up. They said this thing was absolutely colossal. They'd never seen anything like it. And at that point, all three of them knew without a shadow of a doubt that this was no bear. That this was no wolf. This was not something they had seen before. This was something different. And none of them knew what it was. None of them had any idea what this thing was. And they sit there and they stare at it. And it stares right back at them with those same bright, glowing eyes. And stares right back at them. It stares into their soul. Now, they're sitting there, almost frozen in fear. You know, they are trying to decipher, like, what could this thing be? And they don't know. And after that, it takes off. Just like the blink of an eye, it's gone. It takes off. It runs. It seems to take 2 steps, and it's out of their sight. They are frozen, just staring at this empty void where this thing was. Just looking at each other, looking back at it, looking at each other, and looking back to the void. Like, what was that? I don't know. Were our eyes playing tricks on us? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. How would we all have seen this same thing? How would our eyes be? How would all 3 of us were recounting the same? We just saw the same thing. It's not, it's not like 2 of us saw a wolf and the other one's like, what's that? And, or one of us saw it and the other 2 didn't. We all saw the same thing. So they're a little bit freaked out at this point. And they're trying to decide, okay, maybe it's a bear with mange. Mange is a disease that some wild animals get where large patches of their fur will fall off and it'll just be, skin exposed. Like maybe it was a bear with mange. They're like, no, bear's arms are short and stubby. This had like long, sinewy arms that reached down almost to the ground. And they don't know. But one thing they do know is they can still feel this thing around them. They can still feel this thing's presence even though they can't see it. They can feel it watching them from the shadows. It's a very, very uncomfortable feeling for them. And they don't have any choice. The snow's coming down. It's, it's nasty out. They're not getting back down to their car tonight. There's no way. They already have everything set up. They'd have to pack everything up in the snow, hike through the snow, which is now going to be approaching like, a quarter way up their legs. Like it's not possible. It's absolutely not possible for them to get back. So they have no choice. They have to stay put. Hope this thing doesn't come back and still try and get a restful night's sleep so they can, make it back down tomorrow. Well, after a while and a few drinks from the little bit of moonshine they had remaining, they calmed down. They started thinking a little bit rationally. Like, okay, what could this have been? Okay, it could have been this. Maybe it was a wolf and our depth perception is off. It was standing over there on the other side of the trail. So they start to try and reason with themselves, like, what it could have been. Like anybody would do, anybody would do that. Anybody would try and explain it away, especially if it's something that, it's you're terrified by. Why wouldn't you try and explain it away? So they've calmed down as much as they can. They get through their dessert and snow's still coming down. There's no signs of stopping. And they agree, they're going to sleep in shifts. Not so much to make sure that this thing doesn't come back, because they've almost completely put it out their head at this point, but they're going to sleep in shifts to make sure the fire stays lit and one person can keep clearing snow away from the tents as it comes in so it doesn't collapse the tents. So they decide, we'll do 1 hour on, 2 hours off. So you can sleep. So 2 people get to sleep for 2 hours. One person's up and then, do it like that. And they figured that works out pretty fair. And Brett volunteers, I'll take the first shift. That's fine with me. I'll stay up the first hour. Christian and Jason are like, all right, sounds good. Good night. Let's do it. They get into their tent. And Brett sits out there, sits by the fire, throws a few logs on. They've got still a nice pile of firewood. They're not. He's chilling. He's not worried about anything. He's got his water. He's just about to make himself a hot cup of coffee on the fire. He's fine. he doesn't even think he'll even sleep tonight, given with everything that's going on. Snow mainly. So he's sitting there. First 15 minutes goes by. He can already hear Jason snoring. Guy sleeps like a rock. Nothing happens. He's just sitting there, kind of gazing at the sky, watching the clouds roll overhead. Half hour goes by. Does his first round with a small shovel. Shovels out the snow from the sides of the tents to make sure they're nice and clear. Shovels around the fire a little bit. Pats it down. Puts some more wood on. Everything's good. But it's about to be the end of his shift. He checks his watch, and he's like, "Okay, my hour's almost up." And he's like, I'll give him like 10 more minutes. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling fresh. I don't think I'm going to sleep anyways. I'll give him 10 more minutes. And he wants to let him sleep. He like you said, he feels good. He knows he's not going to sleep, but, he knows they're going to be pissed if he doesn't relieve them of, if he doesn't stick to the plan, because they're very, methodical. If they have a plan, they want to do it this way. Like he's grown up with these guys. He knows how they are. So he wants to give them, an extra, he wants to just, take another 2 hours, but he's like, you know what? They're going to be pissed if I do that. So he's like, I'll give him 10 minutes and I'll give him an extra 10 minutes. He's sitting there drinking his coffee that he warmed up, and he's almost done with his coffee at this point. And that's when he hears something. He hears a very low growl. That's the only way he can. He says he didn't think it was a growl at first. What he said, it sounded like more of like a rusty hinge opening, like a rusty old hinge on a door opening. That's how he said it sounded, but he said it sounded off, and that's how he knew some sort of creature was making that noise. And he's looking around, and of course, the thought of that creature that he witnessed a little bit ago pops back in his head. He's looking around for this thing. He's like, he's on edge. He feels his hair stand up. Man, he's like, what is this? Like, what's making this noise? And he's looking around wildly, looking behind him, but he knows he heard it in front of him. He's looking everywhere, and that's when he catches it. When he catches its eyes. And this time, this creature wasn't on the other side of the trail. This creature was not 75 yards away. He looks at it, and this creature was about 20 feet away from him. Eyes locked with each other. Just these glowing white discs, he called them. They looked like the size of $50, just staring into his soul. And he said he sees this thing, and he sees it pressed against the snow. He has its arms next to its head, and its head is laying flat with the snow, and its back legs are laying against the snow, like somebody's like laying down like this. But he says its elbows, it has these twisted elbows, and its arms are so long that its elbows are sticking way up on each side of its body like wings. He said it looked like bat wings. And he just sees it, and he says what I thought it was trying to do is it felt like it was trying to camouflage itself in the snow, like it was trying to camouflage itself in the shadows. And he doesn't know what to do. He stands up, still looking at this thing, and this thing looking right back at him. He stands up, and he manages to gather himself, and he just says, Jason, Christian. They wake up instantly, and they're out of the tent. And from the time he looks over at them and back, the thing's gone. He looked over at the tent while they were getting out of there just for a second, just for a moment. Disappeared. So they come out, dude, what's wrong? What happened? And he explains to them, he's like, I saw that thing. And he recalls the situation exactly like I told you guys. It's what he tells them. He's like, it was right out there. It was close to me. I could see it fully. I don't know what this thing is. I have no idea what this thing is. So they decide to switch up strategies a little bit. They decide that 2 people are going to stay awake, given the circumstances. 1 person will sleep. Same schedule. 2 hours on, 1 hour off. And they agree to this, but nobody wants to go to sleep now. Nobody's trying to sleep after what he just saw. Absolutely none of these guys are. They're like, not me. I'm not going to bed. But finally, they argue enough. Brett convinces them no matter what, he's not going to bed. So they agree that Brett and Christian will take the first shift. Jason will try and sleep. So that's the thing. Christian also takes off his bag, though, or gets his bag out of the tent, I should say. Unzips it, and he has a nice Ruger Super Red Hawk and .454 Casull, which is a 6-shot revolver. This thing can take down pretty much any animal that walks on Earth. He gets that out, always brings a gun with him, just as a backup. Has never felt the need to get it out of his backpack, let alone use it, ever. But this is the first. Gets the gun out, make sure it's all loaded up, sets it on the log they're sitting on, and they just sit there. Brett makes a couple more cups of coffee for them, and they just sit there waiting to see if this thing shows up or if the sunlight's going to show up first. Time goes by. They're still wired. They're not going to sleep, but they can hear Jason has definitely fallen asleep again, so at least one of them are sleeping comfortably. They're about an hour into their first shift, though, at this point. And they're still feeling good. They're still, they're talking a little bit at this point, because for a while they just sat there in silence, just listening, just freaking out at everything they heard. But now at this point, they're talking about some small things, life at school, family, so on and so forth, remember when stories. And they're talking, they're having a good time, until, once again, they hear that low growl, that same noise that Brett heard, that super low, rusty hinge growl. And Brett just freezes. He looks at Christian, he's like, that's it, Christian. That is it. That's the noise that I heard. Christian places his hand on his gun. Looks around. They're looking around for this thing. Because the last time they knew it was close. And they're just looking. Noise stops. They're looking for those big, white, full moon eyes that this thing has. And they don't see it. They don't see anything. Until Brett kind of looks behind him. And right behind them, because here's where they're sitting, right here. And right behind them is the tents, and there's about 2-foot gap in between the tents and them. Right between them and the tent, they see gigantic tracks, gigantic footprints, fresh, super fresh. Something had just gone between them and the tent in the past 15 seconds without them seeing it. That's how quick it was. So Brett is like, Christian. Christian looks, grabs his gun, stands up. He's ready to go. He's got his finger on the hammer, and he's ready to cock this thing back and let a shot off if he needs to. They're looking around. Brett has his can of bear spray at the ready. They're looking around for this thing because they know it's close. They know it's very close. And they say, well, should we like do a perimeter check, like look for this thing? Because there's not much stuff that it could hide behind. And its tracks from what they saw came from the darkness on one side and went to the darkness out of the other side. Like just out of the light of the fire. And they're like, yeah, no, we shouldn't do a perimeter check. You know, that's how every horror movie happens. Like, let's just stay here. Let's wake up my brother. Let's stay here. So, you know, they shout, like, Jason, get up. Gets up, comes out. Explain to him what happened. They show him the prints, which are now quickly getting covered by snow. And, yeah, just those three are sitting there. Those three are sitting there, and just, once again, silence has taken them. Just, they're quiet. They're just quiet, concentrated, focused, like, on what's going on around them. And this time, they hear something. It doesn't take long. They've only been sitting there about 10 minutes since Jason's woken up. And this time they hear something. The same sound that they heard the first time they encountered it the night previously. That sound of nails on vinyl, on fabric. And they look. The only source that this noise could be coming from, and that's the tent. The two tents. They look back at the tents right behind them. It's when they stop. It's when they freeze. And that's when they see it. They see the creature. Not all of it. Only its back legs. Because the rest of its body is inside of Brett's tent. But they see these long, hairless legs made of just this dark, gray, almost black skin. It's very, how they described it is, it looked like it had been in water for days. Like when you're in the bath for too long and your skin wrinkles, that's how its skin looked on its legs. And it was just hairless except for its feet. Its feet had hair, but its legs were just this weird dark gray skin. And they saw it in the tent doing something. And they stand up, locked with fear. Because now that they're only 5 feet away from this thing. This is the closest they've been to it all night. That they know of. Aside from when it passed right behind them. I guess they were closer then, but this is the closest they've been with knowing it. And they just stop. And they just stare. And they just try and decipher what is going on. And it feels like it takes forever. You know, it feels like they've just been staring at this thing for an hour. When in reality it's been about 7 or 8 seconds. Finally, and thankfully, Christian snaps back into reality. Realizes he has a very high caliber revolver on him. With his thumb still on the hammer. He pulls that hammer back. Slips his finger into the trigger guard. Outstretches his hand. Points it directly at Jason's tent and squeezes that trigger, just like he'd done tens of thousands of times before at target practice. And that gun goes boom! That 454 Casull round just echoes off the mountains. Even in the snow, it just echoes. It's so loud. It goes boom! Brings them all right back to reality. The bullet hits this thing. They hear it hit. It sounds like a wet thud. Just, and after that, when that happened, they said they had never heard a sound more evil, more inhuman, more not of this world than what that thing made when they shot it. It stood up, ripping through Brett's tent, ripping through it with its back. It just stood up, tore it into two, and just screamed. They say there's nothing that could describe it. There's nothing they could say that could describe this. It's in a league of its own. It was absolutely nightmare material. And this thing stands up, rips apart the tent, looks at them with those bright white eyes, and they get a full view of this thing illuminated by the fire. They say it does have the head of a wolf, but its mouth is not a snout. Its mouth looks like a human's mouth that could dislocate its jaw and come down about another 4 to 5 inches, like with sharp teeth. Just what they said was like shark's teeth, like multiple rows of teeth inside of its mouth, not just two like we have, multiple rows. And just these bright white eyes, again, like the size of $50. And its body, it had long fur on the top of its body, almost like a shawl. And they said that the thing that it reminded them of is like a bison, like a bison's pelt. That's how it looked. This really long brown hair, and it covered only the top of its body, only the top of its pectorals, and then its body itself looked almost like a human's, and it went down, to the gray. But its entire body was just this dark, weird gray skin. But again, its arms were what was really impressive. They were very small. Its arms were very small, but like it was just pure muscle mass. Like it didn't look like a weak and feeble small. It was a very shredded. Like this thing was made out of pure muscle, and went down to its hands, which on top of its hands, it again had that hair, that really long bison pelt type hair on the top of its hands, and then went down to human style fingers, but it didn't have fingernails. They said it had nails, but it took up the entirety of its finger, and the nails came out off, like the nails were part of its finger. So imagine this, where the end of my finger is, it just turns into a sharp nail, like a bear's, but more, they said like a bear's, but more pointy on all of its fingers. So they just see this thing, and it just stares at them, and just is screaming. He knows he shot it. He's not seeing, they're not looking, but they didn't see any blood. And it just stares. And they're just standing there, because this thing is every bit of 10 feet tall. Just staring up at it. Looking at it. And it's like just having like a showdown. Like it's looking at them. They're looking at it. Again, thankfully, Christian snaps back to reality. Brings the gun up again. feeling his finger squeeze the trigger, and it's gone. It runs. It takes off. He lets his finger off the trigger because this thing's just gone with lightning speed. And that's when they notice, like, that it actually, they did hit it for sure, because they could see blood on the ground, a red trail of blood on the ground that led off to the darkness. So they sit there, they're just like, holy, like, that just happened. We all just saw that, right? And they just, they wanted to, like, acknowledge, like, that none of them were insane, that none of them were crazy, and just imagining this thing. So, they all reassure each other, yes, we all did just see this. And then, once again, they snap back into game plan mode. They're like, what are we going to do? Here's our options. 1, we stay up all night, hope this thing doesn't come back. If we does, we light it up. 2, we did shoot it with a 454 Casull, which is bigger than a 44 Magnum. This thing got up and ran away. Obviously, it can take a few hits and keep on going. Maybe this isn't the best idea. And just to give you a little bit more of the background of how impressive this is, a 44 Magnum will, well, with the right placement of the shot, will stop a grizzly. It will. Like, that's what a lot of people who live in bear country, like in Alaska and stuff, carry on them. A 454 is slightly bigger than a 44, and it didn't slow this thing down. So they're like, okay, so it didn't, 454 didn't do anything. Is it, wise that we stay here? But if we leave, how far are we going to make it? Like, the snow is approaching our knees almost, or getting close to our knees at this point. Like, that's going to slow us way down. Plus, we got to, pack up everything and get going. Okay, what's the third option? The third option is our least favorite. We go, but we go right now. We leave the tents. We just throw the supplies that are right here, still in our bags. Take them with us. We go right this second. And none of them can think of a better plan. None of them want to stay. And none of them even want to stay to pack up. They're like, all right, let's go. Plan, it's not a great plan. It's a very dangerous plan. But we do have the GPS still, can hit SOS if we need to. They still, even after all this, they didn't feel the need. They needed to hit that SOS button. So they're like, all right. So they quickly grabbed all the stuff they could. They grabbed just the food they already had in their bag. They grabbed the fire starter that was sitting next to the fire, and that was it. The gun, the bear sprays, threw it in their bags, saddled up, hit the trails as fast, as quickly as they could. And they got going. And it was hard. It was an extremely strenuous hike. Like, it was no joke. This was a serious hike. It was really testing their mettle. Big time. They said they were trudging through this stuff, and just every footstep just, was just so hard to move. It's just so hard to move. But they knew they were making progress, which was the good, which is very good. They're swearing at themselves the entire time that they didn't bring their snowshoes with, which would have made this very, very easy. But they only had 2 pairs anyways, so, they took a little bit of comfort knowing that, even if they would have brought them, they wouldn't have used them anyways, because they wouldn't have left anybody behind. So they hike, and they hike, and they hike. They believe they hear this thing screaming back up the mountain towards their campsite once. They all stop and they all look up, because they think they hear this thing screaming. But thankfully they don't see it again. So they keep hiking, and also thankfully, it didn't take too long, but the snow began to really slow down a lot. It slowed down to maybe a quarter inch an hour, which is much more favorable than what it was when it was approaching an inch and a half or so per hour. So, yeah, they keep hiking. They lose track of time. And then they notice something that's starting to get bright. The sky's starting to get a little bit brighter. And they take very, very, very big comfort in that the sun's about to come out. But yeah, they keep hiking. And the sun slowly rises. And they finally get to a landmark. And at this landmark, they know they're only about an hour from their car, which in the conditions, who knows, but they know that, like, at this point they're getting very, very close. And the sun is almost fully up now. They're feeling good. They decide to take a break and take a breather, eat some food, as they're all starting to, get very, very hungry and thirsty. So they stop, clear off some snow, and just make a little impromptu breakfast. They did bring a single burner, so they were able to melt down some snow for water and make some coffee, make some dehydrated scrambled eggs and stuff like that. So they get done with their breakfast, and they get back to their car just fine. They get back to their car, just no more problems at all. Get their stuff packed in and get out of there. First stop they make is to the forest district. The forest, I forget the name of it, but we'll call it the forest district, where, like, you can report what happens, like, out there. And so they go and they file a report. They say, like, oh, like, this is what happened. This is what we saw. And the thing was, is they were just, as they were describing this creature that they saw to the rangers that were at this forest district station, as they were describing this creature to them, they kept asking him, where exactly were you at? Where exactly were you at? Like, where exactly were you at? What did this look like? What did this look like? This and that. They kept asking them, and they kept checking something. They couldn't see what it was on the computer, but they kept checking something on the computer. And what they said is they don't know for sure, but it felt like they were cross-referencing something. So they were thinking that this wasn't the first time. That this was not the first encounter. Although, because the Rangers did not sound too surprised. They took their report very seriously and didn't ask a lot of questions, which for an encounter like this and describing a 10-foot tall, like, beast, it would raise a few questions, but they said they just did not ask enough questions. It felt like they already had this information from before. So they were wondering if maybe they'd seen something. Well, a few days pass. It warms up a little bit, enough for some of the snow to melt, and they decide to make a run back up to get their tent and the other equipment they left up there. More than likely, nobody had taken it. Nobody had stolen it. This time it's just Christian and Jason. They don't want to leave. They don't want to bring Brett, because he's not as seasoned as they are. Nice way of saying, like, you're going to slow us down. Like, we want to get up there and get back. And that was their plan. They were going to go as quick as they could up there and as fast as they could back. And they got there at 6 a.m. and they wanted to be back at their car by 3 p.m. So that was their plan. They were going to hike up there, pack everything, get back as fast as they could. And that's what they did. They made record time this time, for themselves anyways, to get up to that first campsite. And when they got up there, their stuff was still there. The tents were still there. The supplies were still there. The shovel was still there. But the tents were ripped into absolute shreds. And the metal shovel was twisted. Like somebody grabbed it and just twisted it. Which is a smaller shovel. So it takes some extreme force to be able to grab something that small with your hands and actually be able to manipulate it how it was. So their gear was there. It was just trashed. And they said, like, there is no animal that would have done this. Like, it wouldn't have been a bear. We didn't leave food here. A bear would have done that maybe if we would have left food in the tents, but we didn't. We know we didn't. This was something else. So they saw that. They picked up their scraps and they got out of there as fast as they could. So I don't know. They don't know what's in those mountains where they were. They're not going back to find out. They've discussed it a little bit. They've discussed, going up there with, multiple people armed and trying to see if they could find this thing again. But they think that some things should just be better, left undisturbed. That's one of them. That is one of them. Never heard anything back from the forest rangers or anything like that, so haven't seen this thing again. But it was definitely one of the most terrifying nights of their life. Yeah, so if you guys have any idea what it could have been, let me know. That's the end of their story. And again, I want to give a big shout out to them for names have been changed. I did say, they wanted to stay anonymous, so names have been changed. But yeah, so I want to give a big shout out to Jason for sharing that with me. So yeah, I hope you sharing it with all of us. So thank you very much. But yeah, that's the story. That's the first story. Let me know what you think of this video, guys. If you want me to do more camp stories like this, I would love to. I love storytelling. If you don't think it's a good cursed urban video, let me know. I think I'm going to keep doing this. It is fun, but I might put it on another channel. I might put it on a separate channel. We'll see how it does. So if you guys like it, you want it to stay on cursed urban, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe as well if you haven't yet. But yeah, let me know what you thought of these videos, guys, or this video. It was really fun to share this story with everybody. So yeah, well, that about does it. I'm going to get settled in here. My throat is getting sore from so much talking. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun. But all right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to the story, and let me know what you thought. Let me know what you thought of the story. Let me know what you thought of the video. Appreciate you guys. Big shout out to our patrons and our YouTube channel members. Thank you guys for making tonight's video possible. Check out the social media links in the description. And that about does it. All right. Have a good night or day wherever you're at, and we'll see you very soon on the next video. Peace out, guys.